Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Hang on, where did it go? Welcome all in 2024. Another year has dawned, and it's in Delhi and NCR, it's pretty cold. So, welcome to a cold 2024. And in fact, today, what we are going to be doing is Diaspora networks. Can you see my slide? Can you hear my voice? Guys,
Yes,
can
sir.
you hear my voice and see the
Yes,
slide?
yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So we talked about, in fact, last year we looked at the difference between migration, we looked at diaspora, we looked at transnationalism. In fact, quickly, every migrant is a prospective diaspora. Every migrant or diaspora is a transnational because they connect back home. So let's look at the diaspora network. In fact, the very word network is kind of interconnected in itself. But we have to also look at the fact that, say, for example, let's take an example of this particular class. We have, this class on diaspora and migration studies. All of you are possibly connected on, let's say, a network which the platform is a peer-to-peer messaging, which is WhatsApp. I am not there. However, even though you might be connected to each other using a technology, is it actually networked in the sense that, how are you taking advantage of each other in terms of knowledge? Because this is typically a knowledge network. How is knowledge dispersed in the network? How is it taken care of? So, inevitably, just because people are connected based on a particular identity. So, for example, today, all of one of your identities is a student of diaspora and migration studies. However, that identity is not sufficient enough for you to take advantage of this particular network unless there are other conditions which are met. Similarly, as soon as a person moves from one nation to another, they might have a common identity based on citizenship, but that does not mean that a network gets formed or a network is effectively utilized. So once you understand this, then we go forward in terms of seeing what are the basic things which are required for a network and how do these networks work then. The way we run this class again, you can stop me at any moment of time to ask a question. If there is a value add or a thing that you like to share, just stop. You can interrupt me or you can put raise your hand or put it in the chat. Either which way works. First, tell me whether the slides are moving or not. Did the slide move? I have just moved my slide. Did it move on your screen?
No, sir.
Not moving.
Not moving? There is some technology issue which prevents the slides from moving. I don't know why. Okay, let's try and see if. Does this move now?
Yes,
We can
sir.
see objective slides, sir.
You've seen, are you able to see the objective slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the slide is moved. So the slide is moved. Perfect. So, phenomena of diaspora network in terms of objective, nature and characteristics of a network, implication of that. The basic objectives. Again, let me reiterate, most of my presentation is on the same framework as your course content, the course units that have been given to you. I pick out more information from other places on the net or a book that I've read. And in case you want a presentation of mine, you can send a mail to my mail ID. I'll share my mail ID again. I'm sharing it on the chat. You can, if you send me a mail, I will share my PPT. I am also there on messaging apps, but not WhatsApp. I'm on Telegram and Signal in case somebody wants to connect. That's my number. You can see it on the chat screen. Okay. The concept of diaspora assumed a wider usage over the years. We know that. We have been reading over the last few units. Concept is being used to denote any kind of immigrant. In fact, self-declared diasporas have the concept of self-declared diasporas have come in. There's a lot of gray areas in terms of diaspora or diaspora network. Immigrants who are living outside origin country permanently or temporarily, even temporarily, is self-defined as diaspora. A lot of authors use them as diaspora. Immigrant community always maintains connection with its real or imagined homelands in the destination countries. We have already know that. Since diaspora maintain real or psychic connections with their respective homelands, they're aptly called transnational communities. We have read that in the last year on the units. Advent of globalization. Again, globalization is more on an institutional state level, whereas transnationalism is on an individual or people level. Fosters the transnational aspect of diaspora more than ever before. The usage of faster transportation technology today does different things to different people. Globalization, accompanied by advancement of transport, communication, and information technologies, reinforce and sustain national identity. So today, it's no longer the case when, for example, the bonded labor or the indentured people were taken from their homelands. They had no hope of coming back. Today, people are connected 24 by 7 using messaging apps, using things like Zoom, Google Meet. Today, we are in a virtual class using Zoom. People might be dispersed all over the country or abroad. They can come and join this. Diasporas maintain socio-economic, cultural, and political relationships with the country, which is obviously the case because remember the way human beings or human societies are structured. Just because a person moves from a particular place does not mean his family, his extended family, his connections, his colleagues, or other relationships that has been established disappear in respective locales or hostland as well as across the globe. And now when people move, because of a better connectivity and better technology, that connections remain. So the first thing what people did when Facebook came in and people started making Facebook accounts were to search their classmates of school, classmates of college, colleagues, and that is how connections were made. Social reality given their diasporic consciousness because of the fact your identity continues. Are you able to hear me? It says my internet is unstable.
Yes, sir, we can
Yes,
hear you.
sir.
Okay, perfect. At any moment of time you can't hear me, just put it in the chat or tell me. Suddenly I got a message my network is unstable or something to that effect. So, for example, look at this. This is an African diaspora. There is an African Diaspora Investment Symposium, ADIS 24. There is a whole African diaspora network. It's a website available which has got things about us. Now, Africa is a continent, and yet there is a whole network of Africans across the world who are being invited for this conference in California. March 22, 24, California, Silicon Valley. On top of that, with this network of the continent, for example, there is a network of Nigerians. And look at the wordings. Our country, Nigeria, as a nation, has discovered the great need to innovate her sons and daughters abroad in the development both of public and private sectors. She wants them to make themselves visible by registering here. This is purely an institutional way of connecting the diaspora. And this has been an endeavor by the government. So, in fact, all nations today understand the fact that diaspora become a very important resource which can be used to plow information, remittance, etc., back home. So the whole concept of diaspora as somebody who has left a particular place and gone to another place, and that's it, is now no longer true. That connectivity continues to remain. With enhanced economic and social capital of global diasporas, they become an important stakeholders in homeland and host countries in the era of globalization. So, irrespective of the fact that the people might have moved, they might have taken a citizenship of another country, they are still connected through various ways. The concept diaspora network has assumed significance given the fact that growing international migration in an era of global. We've also seen that migration over the last half century has remained the same, about 3%. And yet people are moving, and again, people have always moved throughout history. But now, with this movement, you are not saying goodbye to a person who has moved. You say, well, you have moved, that's your decision, but you are still a part of us. You might be a part of somebody else, but you are still a part of us. Because this particular definition of diaspora, Gevorkan is to see diaspora as a network of culturally or national affiliated individuals with some common background living outside the borders of the. Here, a network is implicit, yet it does not lead to uniformity of either identity or motivation. Just because you are an Indian and you go to a foreign land and you meet another Indian, you might have an initial sense of connection, but that's that. There might be an interaction, but it is not sustainable beyond a particular point. And as I said, we might in this class be people who are studying diaspora and migration studies, but we meet Saturdays or on an assignment, but there is no sustainability beyond that. So similarly with diaspora, just because a migrant is going to a particular place and meets other people does not mean anything. It might be an initial, recognition based on identity, but it's not sustainable beyond random initiatives. So how does a network come? Because the whole concept of a network is beyond the, it has to be sustainable. The degree of diaspora networks can be determined through status of socio-economic position in host lands and diaspora engagement policy of homeland. Now, that engagement policy is what possibly makes it a little sustainable, or there are other ways by which these networks become sustainable. So, broadly classified as social and economic networks, social networks includes immigrant, migrant, ethnic, religion, family, kinship, gender. Economic networks include entrepreneur, management, industrial, and technology networks. Again, these are, broad categorization, but for a network to move forward, say, for example, you have your extended family. Your extended family only works when there is possibly periodic face-to-face interaction. You meet on festivals, you meet on specific days, there is give and take, there is some time, and a lot of times there is an economic consideration. The families are able to support each other economically in times of stress. That's how the network becomes sustainable. Categories identified among skilled are student, scholarly, local association. For example, this particular class or all the students, the network is like a scholarly network. Expert pool, assistance to development agencies, intellectual scientific diaspora networks. Phenomena of transnationalism we have seen is an outcome of diaspora networks spanning across and beyond homelands, which we have seen over the last few units. Functionality across a triangular dimension of identity, trust, and engagement infrastructure. So even if people have a common identity, is there a trust which gets established? More often than not, in case of virtual networks, the development of the trust becomes extremely difficult. So, for example, why we are able to trust each other in this particular virtual classroom is because there is an engagement infrastructure done by Dr. Sadanand, who's a part of IGNU, which is putting out this course. And when you join and you get the email ID from IGNU or from the lead professor, then there is an element of trust. Otherwise, how do you know who's who or what people are talking in terms of a virtual environment? Even in the real world, you trust based on a lot of considerations. Identity becomes the first element of trust. So you are possibly, let's say, a Keralite in Delhi, you meet a fellow Keralite, or you are a person from Punjab, which is there in the East. You meet another person from Punjab. That's the first identity. And the first level of identity gets you a certain level of trust. And then there is an engagement infrastructure. Social capital may be thought of as links, shared values, and understanding in society. Individuals and groups to trust each other so that, and without trust, you cannot work. And that is why on internet and a virtual space, it requires a lot of work to develop that trust. Otherwise, it's an anonymous space. How do you develop that trust? So in fact, we will, as we go around, we'll see a case study on some networks, how the trust was established, what were the parameters of trust. There are specific cases on trust building. Social bonds refer to connection among people with some common identity. Bridges are those relationships that stretch beyond individual or groups' immediate social bond circles. And linkages are diverse interrelationships across entire scope of social spectrum. So just because just because you are an Indian, which is a common identity, how would two Indians who are in a foreign land develop that trust with each other? Because the person might say, I'm an Indian, he might look to be an Indian, but how would you develop that trust? Networks are real life connections, are relationships among real people and social or professional groups. And remember, in this word relationship, there is a inherent give and take. Relationships are not transactional. They could be transactional, but inevitably a transaction also involves a give and take and a trust. What is referred to as diaspora is not a monolith self-organizing cooperative group. We have, over the last units on various diaspora, seen that there is no monolith, diaspora based on common identity, trust, and robust engagement infrastructure within and outside. And there has to be a particular methodology or particular ways this engagement has to happen. So, main features of diaspora networks, instead of diaspora networks originating from historical human migration, are types of dynamically overlapping formal or informal social and economic connections that may engage with their countries of origin, but these connections often do not evolve into meaningful relationship unless a transactional mechanism develops. And we shall see subsequently in the Armenian trade diaspora network how they were able to establish this transacting mechanism. Inevitably, unless that transacting mechanism is developed and informed and is trustworthy, a network will not work, because people then will break off. They will not be able to trust the system. Okay, so let's look at the Armenian merchant network, which originated in the old Julfa town of the historic Armenia, late 16th and 18th century. Armenians, there is a lot of documentation of Armenian diaspora And Armenian merchant networks were, there was one of the oldest networks which was there as a merchant network, late 16th and 18th century. Resilience and operational trust. Robust commercial ties with major trading houses from Venice to South Asia, capturing almost full control of the international trade of Iranian silk. Subsequently, they were forcibly deported from Old Julfa and was transferred to inner Iran near Isfahan. So this was what happened, and yet that network continued because they were Armenian Christians. That was an identity, Armenian Christians. Merchants had access to some markets close to other mercantile networks of the Persian Empire, and their knowledge and familiarity with East and Islamic traditions opened doors. So they were able to establish trust. Remember, Persian Empire was Islamic, and yet these guys were able to work with them in spite of that different religious identity. At their peak, the Julfan Armenian merchant operation as a commercial ethnic networks. But why? Relied on legally enforceable contracts made with representatives of their own community, often from within the same families. That was what was trustworthy for them because it's the same family. Remember the Italian mafia or the various groups which work together, they are family run enterprises. That gives them a certain amount of trust. The decision making center and contract dispute resolution remained tightly under the control of the head offices back in Isfahan. Now, this was at that time, the 1600 to or the 17th to the 19th century. Remember that time technology, the communication technology was much more archaic. Things were different. How the contracts happened were different. The value system were different. The agents often leaving family members or real collaterals behind. That was also a way they were able to ensure that everybody remains in check. There is always, the network has to have a check and balance. Were assigned to post abroad on a circular basis with alternating appointments across countries. In fact, any system which works would necessarily need to have checks and balances. Because if there are no checks and balances, then inevitably the system will not work and collapse. Returning to the central node for regular reports. Again, why I repeat, because it was the older time, the communication, the transport was not as efficient as today. You needed to have some sort of a central control. Everything was within the family. People were known. That's how they were trusted. And we will see, as soon as the network started becoming bigger, things started changing, other competitors started coming, it started impinging the network. Returning to the central node for regular reports and marriage. Hang on. A network of communication evolved at the entire geographical expanse, crisscrossing empires, relying on written communication in Julfan American dialect. A feature which sustained the commercial trust among dispersed members, ethnically and cultural common network. So inevitably, the stress point of the network was that it was not going out from a common identity of the Armenian Christian and the family. So if they were to compete with more competition, unless they would get fresh talent or were able to trust others, inevitably they were always constrained within the family. Began to fade by the middle of the 18th century was due to physical and political destructions of its operational center and court system in Iran, because all these factors keep on coming in. There are all these X factors which keep coming in. Regressive inability to transplant the central node to India, possibly because of the fact during that time India was at the peak. Rising competition from European East India companies, pressure of assimilation on agents abroad, coupled with their push for autonomy. Inevitably, autonomy becomes important as trading becomes more, as particular agents are able to do more business. But the inability to develop a functional, flexible trust mechanism outside of the Julfan's common identity network, that became very important. The critical structural weakness leading to the network's downfall, that would have ended the network even in the absence of external pressures. So inevitably, unless you are able to get new ideas and new talent and continue to rely on the same family structures, the innovativeness will not happen. And if the innovativeness does not happen, then more often than not, competitions will keep on arising and pressures will keep on arising, which led to the decline of this network. And inevitably, central-led networks or any network which is one of the reason, look at the internet. Internet is a network of computers. The reason internet does not go down is because it's not centralized. Inevitably, every network which is centralized has one point of failure. And if there is anything which happens in the central node, then the failure happens throughout the network. Internet works because it's a decentralized network. In examples of historical and recent diaspora networks, self-organization and resilience is suspect. Doesn't work. It always, this self-organization and resilience does. There is always some sort of an external, push or an infrastructure, things which will need to come for, sustaining a network. Common identity acts as a minimal and initial foundation for the next form of social capital, namely trust. Outside of the immediate circle, but within the same cultural network, there has to be some common elements. The dominance of the social and cultural forms shaping individuals' daily view and perception of compatriots are subject to external pressures. Professional competence within the same multinational organization or attempts to break out of the rigid networks control. So just because you are saying that I have a common identity is not enough. How that will span or move to trust, and then how that trust will span beyond the immediate identity norms. So for example, if the Indian diaspora network, let's say in the US, has to get some amount of knowledge back home, they might need to get out of that Indian circle because there might be some skills or some knowledge which is outside the Indian diaspora circles. And for that, they would have to have some sort of a institutional mechanism of engagement and yet build up a trust with more people outside. So, for example, today, the way for in a global situation, South Asia, or let's say Asia, or let's say the global South would need to come together to be able to garner world resources and have a similar kind of development as the global North. That's how networks are made, the Asian networks or the Euro networks or the North Atlantic Treaty. Now, the new thing which is come in, the role of information and communication technologies. So, for example, if you have a network on WhatsApp, what is the engagement mechanism? Who posts? What is the kind of posting which has happened? How does information spread using the computer network? Have much wider, denser, and stronger in the light of advancements of transport and information and communication technology. ICT tools like email discussion group, blogs, WhatsApp groups, and social link like Facebook, Instagram, like the diaspora networks further intensified. So now the connectivity and common interests can easily be accessed. So today, I can, for example, make a network of like-minded, let's say, uh, people studying migration studies or diaspora studies on Facebook and sustain that network by getting people to regularly post links on various aspects of migration studies and diaspora studies. Then, on top of that, that sustainability increases with physical meetings, conferences, paper presentations. That's the way network grows. So when Sada sir talks about doing a project, it is basically increasing engagement for the student group of this particular network. Because unless that engagement increases, the network does not become strong enough. Say, for example, the overseas Chinese network website. I was opening up the website yesterday, it was not opening, there was some problem, but I was able to get their LinkedIn page. Where they are, enables people of Chinese origin, and there are 12 employees. Simple, collaborative, helps you like-minded. And even we saw that Africa networks, it was about us. How can you join? How can you control? On what areas that you are in? So things like skill, knowledge, intellectual, academic, scientific diaspora networks have reduced the phenomenon of brain drain. Now, with these kind of connectivities and globalizations, you are technically you are not going anywhere. You might have physically traveled, but virtually you can be connected at any moment of time. You are 365 degrees, 365 days, 24 by 7 available, have reduced the phenomenon of brain drain. So the concept of brain drain, what we had, these people have left homeland and gone abroad, is no longer true, because these are, virtually there to help the homeland by sharing or circulating gained knowledge, experience, information to members of the network in home countries with the assistance of ICT, converted brain drain into brain gain, or brain circulation, or brain bank in the era of globalization. So each country is benefited out of it. Regions are benefited out of it. So, for example, Africans who have acquired particular skill set can look at addressing problems related to Africa. Indians who have acquired particular skill, and we will see the network, the assistance networks on entrepreneurship. We have a case study of that. Meyer and Brown identified 41 expat knowledge networks around the world for mobilizing high-skilled expats to contribute the skill and expertise. 5 categories: student, scholarly, local assistance, expert pool, transfer of knowledge through expat. Problem today is more on a bureaucratic level, because when the states are trying to create engagement policy, they create through bureaucratic apparatus. Bureaucratic apparatus is much slower than individuals or people. So more often than not, you will have diasporic networks who are ready to offer some expertise or service. Inevitably, there is this disparity between how these guys, individuals, want to, engage vis-a-vis state bureaucracies, which are generally slow. All state bureaucracies are generally slow. So you have assistance through transfer of knowledge through expat nationals, top 10 program of UNDP. Network like the Association of Thai Professionals in America and Canada, the Philippines Brain Gain Network, the Polish Scientists Abroad, Arab Scientists in Technology Abroad. So inevitably, if you see, Every country across the world has realized this. Palestinian scientists and technology abroad, the global Korean network, the Colombian CALDAS network, South African network, and skill abroad, classic cases of knowledge diaspora networks. So every country has realized that today people who have left are not enemies of the homeland, but they are actually ambassadors, and they have particular skill, and because of their sentimentality and psychic connections back home, they are not lost to the homeland. So that initial treating of diasporas as enemies is no longer true across the world. We had last time seen in that Mexico, case study also how the oh, we will see that in the next chapter on how diaspora affect policies, how the Mexican government or the Mexican state started looking at their diasporas. Initially, they were looked at enemies. Bearing a few networks, most of them are non-profit, independent entities, not affiliated to any political party or national government. More often than not, a lot of these networks would try to be non-political. Membership for most of the networks, but we have seen now that most diaspora also are segregated onto with their political identities. Membership for most of the network is open to researchers, scientists, and students alike. Members and diasporas could be a part of multiple networks. So they could be also a part of a political network. They could be a part of a non-political network. And you could have multiple identities. Members for most of the networks are highly dispersed in various activities to organize different social, cultural, and educational events. So skilled knowledge intellectual have acted as mediators of facilitators of international trade flows. They can forge trade and investment links with ease between home and host countries, and especially diasporas who are in positions, specific position in host lands, can do this facilitation much faster. Direct diaspora investment has more advantage than foreign direct investment because of the presence of network members, flow of information. There is an emotional or psychic connection, and psychic connection. They will not backtrack. So inevitably, when a diaspora wants to invest in the homeland, they also look at that privilege and that, that prestige they will have in their networks back home. That here is the guy who left this particular place and he's investing back. So their families look at this as a positive. So, over the weekend, I saw this movie called 12th Fail, which is about this particular boy who comes from Chambal region, from a poor family, and goes on to become an IPS. This is the story. This is supposed to be a real life story modeled on this particular guy who became an IPS. So what they were saying is that inevitably, when he comes to Delhi for doing his coaching, there's this guy who says, if you succeed, then all the people around you will feel proud that, and they will almost feel that they have succeeded. So that is the kind of emotional and psychic connection which happens between diaspora and homeland. Not only promote ethnic nationalism, but also civic nationalism by acting as bridges, mediators, facilitators, lobbies, and advocates groups. Primacy of national security and economic interest in respective homelands. A no less sensitive problem of diaspora network engagement infrastructure. Because remember, irrespective of the fact there is a common identity, there is still a fragility. How that identity will translate into trust, and how that identity trust will work with an engagement infrastructure capable of appealing to professionals with high intrinsic motivations, who in turns are capable of contributing directly to home country's development. And there is an example of this Thai network. Okay. Sustainable relationship state-led diaspora setting have emerged already after successful introduction of an entrepreneur project by diaspora. For example, the Indian example. the Indo-US entrepreneurs, which is called TIE. A lot of you may not have heard about the TIE. In the technology sector, most people have known about TIE because these were the initial network which promoted venture capitalism and entrepreneurship in the technology sector. Since its initiation by Indian professionals in 1992, global networking, funding, mentoring, and technology incubation. So inevitably, they funded projects. And funding was a major issue. Remember, entrepreneurship and venture capitalism was not a concept which was known in Indian technology circuits. In fact, in the 90s, when the liberalization happened and Manmohan Singh was spearheading the liberalization regime, these were the guys who came in and promoted entrepreneurship. The Indo-US entrepreneur elevated India's economy into the global value chain, setting stage for official state to open up to multivariate diaspora. TIE and similar initiative contribute to the rise of entrepreneurial culture about network professional. I remember the time, this was the time I was out of college. So it was very exciting that now Indian professionals could look at entrepreneurship. There was no environment for entrepreneurship in the 90s. With assistance from external funding, from multilateral and development organization. For example, Moldova has established Moldova is a country in Europe, robust working relationship with its diaspora group, capturing diaspora's cultural interests, maintaining trust, and offering a meaning of engagement. And inevitably, that engagement infrastructure is being offered by various countries now. And now with this, with betterment of ICT, communication and technology, this engagement infrastructure becomes easier to do. The hometown association across migrants host countries have helped Moldova to functionally organize informal diaspora networks. Individuals from same region in Moldova to discover each other, channeling the potential back to local development. So then there is this Greek Diaspora Fellowship Program, Scholarly Exchange Program since 2016, Greek University to scholars in Greek and Cypriot diaspora in US and Canada. Strong institutional connections with this vast diaspora to internationalize Greek ICT sector, strong positive effect of the program into the country's higher education system and professional development of individual. So, rather than trying to look at, tying up with foreign universities, the diaspora can really contribute to, a lot of development in the global south because of that emotional and psychic connections. Okay, so let's sum up. Not all migration leads to creation of loose diaspora or diaspora networks. There are objective factors, network formation, effective, sustained, tested through time operation, 3 dimensions of social capital, bond bridges and linkages, is not accidental, recent discovery, yet the connection is fragile and requires proactive policy. Hyper-globalized, fast-paced technology environment, assimilation pressures are molding new global expats with multi-layered transnational identities. On sustaining diaspora network and engaging them in meaningful ways is on home economies. So home countries need to now think innovative ways for engaging diaspora. And inevitably, the diaspora will always wait for home to engage. If there's a lessons from history is that self-organizing diaspora networks are resilient only as much as institutional practices that a community is capable of developing and internalizing, spanning from cultural to sober business initiative. Self-sustaining becomes difficult beyond a particular point. There are some references and any questions? Let me start the video. Why is the video not starting? There's some yeah. Hi. In fact, when I was doing this presentation, Swadesh, I was remembering you.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Hi. I was remembering you because of, you talking about a lot of diasporas from your region,
Yeah,
going across. Now, I'm not sure if, the state government or the regional province, the area MLA, or is there any institutional engagement of this network? I'm not sure. I don't think
yeah,
so
you
there
are
is.
rightly pointed out. In this December, many US citizens of India, they coming back to in this vacation, Christmas. This time there is a vacations.
Hmm.
They coming to India and Telangana especially.
Huh.
They make many programs in December only, sir, at
Okay.
Hyderabad. Yeah, they called all the ministers and some party leaders.
Hmm.
Uh, Telangana Development Forum in USA
Okay.
passed welfare of Telangana people. They
Okay.
support major to our farmers, distressed families. Uh, Financially, they making help, and they making help to schools infrastructure related works also. Tana Telugu Association of America, recently
Okay.
Global Telangana Forum, GTA, and Gulf Telangana Associations, GTA. Many of that, sir. They're
Okay.
organizing many functions at
Okay.
Hyderabad. Yeah, they
So,
make it.
are they looking at a long-term engagement of this, or this networks have been formed after which the engagement policies are not very clear?
Yeah, it's not very clear, sir,
It's not very
that much.
clear.
But the people only they engage and they met in US and India. That's it. And some people also, you said, business people, class people also, they self-interest and financially and economically also they're thinking they're doing business and investments in Telangana. They're connecting with that
So
aspect also.
inevitably, if you see what Swadesh is talking about, these are individual efforts rather than an institutionalized engagement policy. Because an
Yes.
institutionalized engagement policy should spell out what is the policy in terms of various engagements. Is it a financial engagement? Because inevitably the emotional bond is very strong, the emotional and psychic bond, and these people are more than happy to the especially as you rightly said, business people are more than happy to invest back because they feel they are giving back. But in the
Yes.
absence of institutionalized engagement policies, what typically happens is that it is burst and spurts.
Yeah, sir. Government, the local government, state government also need to think about what are the structural platform. Uh, they make some policy. If you go to Kerala, there is a Kerala Lok Sabha. You already heard about that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that we have to change the gradually.
So
It's not.
that institutional engagement, what we talked
Yeah.
about in this network. Right. Thank you, Sadesh. Any other
Thank
question?
you. Thank you.
Any questions? Praful, any question? कोई सवाल?
Yes, sir, I have many, but I joined you late in this session.
Okay. But ask whatever.
Sir, a few days ago, I heard about Japan that
Okay.
they are protesting outsiders. क्योंकि ऐसा है क्योंकि सरकार जो है वो मतलब बढ़ावा दे रही है माइग्रेशन को क्योंकि उनका जो ये है वो मतलब वो बूढ़े की जो जनसंख्या है वहाँ मतलब वृद्ध
Is
लोगों
very
की वो
high.
या बढ़ रही है और ऐसा हो जाए कि कुछ दिन उनका अर्थव्यवस्था पे भी इसका मतलब काफी ही ये असर डालेगा तो वो सरकार प्रमोट कर रही है लेकिन वहाँ के जो इंडिजेंट पीपल हैं वो मतलब इसका प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं तो इस तरह से तो डायस्पोरा पे तो काफी इफेक्ट पड़ेगा
What Praful is saying for people who are not able to understand Hindi is that he was reading about Japan. that there is some protest happening in Japan because Japanese government is promoting immigration because they have a aging population, and inevitably an aging population does not give a human dividend, human capital dividend. For example, the human capital dividend of India is great because we have a very young population. More often than not, North, for example, global North has aging population. So local people are protesting, but the government is wanting to, get immigrants in to do certain work. So Praful is asking, but won't this affect migration? Because if local people start protesting, won't it affect migration? Praful, this is the case across the world. So irrespective the fact that the whole human history is a history of migration, we are currently in a state where there is this politics of identity. If you look at US, they are protesting immigration, whereas all of them are immigrants themselves. They are the guys who came from various parts of Europe and remove the indigenous population. And these are the guys who now have settled in the US and are protesting immigration. But this is something which will remain throughout the world. There is going to be this negotiation between existing and the new. And we have seen that more often than not, this protest will happen and people will still migrate, because migration is basically a aspirational thing. People want better, people want more, and it's a basically also a supply and demand situation. Wherever there is a demand, supply will happen. Just like in terms of items, material items of supply and demand, humans also work on a supply demand situation in a capitalist model. So if there is a need for nurses, women or men from various parts of the world will move into that country where there's a need for nurses or for caregivers. तो ये प्रफुल्ल ये चलता रहेगा. इसमें ये प्रोटेस्ट भी होगा. At the same time, migration will keep on happening. The Japan state knows that it needs people to run various things because they don't have younger populations. And if you see, for example, India is supplying labor to Israel. They have recently signed a pact with Italy to supply labor. They have signed a pact with, I think, France or someplace else to supply labor. So this will happen, and this has been happening throughout history. Praful?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, what about then North Korea, sir? How they manage, sir? Because they
Not
don't
much,
have
not
any-
much information is coming from North Korea. Okay. Kangat is writing that Norca in Kerala is an institutionalized network supporting diaspora network. So it's called Norca. There is a Pravasya Bhavit there in January 9th, where prominent Indian diaspora will be facilitated and engaged with the. Rajni, you're right. However, the institutionalized engagement mechanism in terms of specifics, unless that is very clear, these transactions may not be sufficient enough. Say, for example, if a diaspora wants to invest in, let's say, a particular state, how does the transaction happen? Why is the bureaucratic role slow in a system? Shreya, bureaucratic role is slow because bureaucracy is a rigid frame. They work on specific laws. So inevitably, a decision in a bureaucratic network across the world is always slower. Human networks or human beings work much faster. So let's say you were to think of an idea. Now, when you have to put that idea as a policy, that policy needs some amount of development, because that policy is going to be applied generically to a diverse set of people. It's a slow process. Bureaucracies in states are always slower than individuals or organizations. Shreya? Migration and mobility agreement with Italy. That's right, Naman, you are absolutely right. Shreya, have you understood this?
No, sir. Can you please repeat? Because hello.
Tell me, Shreya.
My question is that there is a point when you say that bureaucratic role slow the system.
Correct.
I can't understand that. This is
So,
not clear
so,
for me.
so look at the fact, how would a state government or a local government function? There are a set of bureaucrats like IAS or like state civil services guys. Now, how would a thing become a law or a policy? Inevitably, somebody has to start on a particular idea, then that idea needs to be discussed. There is a political process also which comes in, because if there is policy which is which is being discussed, which is politically harmful to the ruling party, they might shelve it. So for example, assuming the fact that if you need to have a dual citizenship, now if the Indian state was to think about a dual citizenship, don't you think there will be a backfire in terms of the local politics? Because the local people will say, how are you allowing non-resident Indians in the US to allow to vote in the local election? Because that will dilute their political mobilizations and their political power. Shreya?
Yes, sir.
So that is why the bureaucratic process is always slower. It takes time.
Hmm. Okay.
Shreya?
Yes, sir. That time I can't figure out. So that's why I
Perfectly fine.
raised
Now
the
you've
question.
understood. Now you've understood.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So Swadesh is saying we are going to celebrate PBT 2024 at junior college competitions to student essay, elocution, painting, topic given to the climate change issue. Absolutely. So these are various ways the engagement happens. Now, inevitably, these are still transactional. How does this transaction go into a sustainable engagement is what needs to be figured out. Sanjeev, you have raised your hand.
Sir, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Tell me.
Sir, I have a simple doubt. From institutional point of view, actually, when we talk about brain drain, which ultimately leads to brain gain, then I mean the brain gain is more in percentage comparatively with regard to that brain drain. So my point is we should not talk about brain drain in actual.
Oh, see, inevitably, when people were leaving to go abroad, say, for example, in the 80s and the 90s, a lot of students from IITs who had, studied in these premier institutes went abroad. The term, for example, in India as well as other countries, they said these particular brains are moving out.
Yes.
Now, nobody had quantified the brain drain. They only used the generic term as brain drain.
Yes, sir.
So, I don't think so anybody has quantified in terms of how much brain drain is happening or how much brain gain is happening. Those quantification mechanisms, I don't think so have come in yet.
Okay.
Or at least I have not come across anybody quantifying them.
Okay. Sir,
So,
for example,
boliye. Sorry.
For example, if an IT professional is going abroad and is contributing something for establishing a, say, for example, an IT related office back in homeland,
Okay.
which leads to ultimately, which leads to a lot of employment.
Correct.
So, comparatively, when one person is going in return, there is more of brain gain than of brain drain. What I
Correct.
think.
Correct. You're right. These are multiple ways you can look at this. These are, generic terms which have been used loosely
Sir.
by a lot of people.
Sir.
So I don't think so. There has been a quantification of how much brain drain versus brain gain.
Sir.
These are more, loose terms which have been used, and we have seen, for example, the term diaspora itself has been used very loosely for a lot of gray areas. So in the last 3 units, for example, in the end of 2023, when we were talking about diaspora, transnational, and migrant, if you saw that multiple scholars had multiple ways they were defined, and there was a lot of confusion. Sanjeev?
Sir,
So, see how you have explained it. Obviously, that's a perspective.
Sir.
It's not just a brain drain, but it's also a brain gain. It's how
Yes.
it is engagement.
So
You're right, Sanjeev.
my point is institutionalizally, I mean, the institution should encourage for brain dead initially, sir. Though there are some loopholes.
Sanjeev, then there is politics which come into the picture.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So we have also to understand politics is one of the it's one of the logistic things one has to deal with. We cannot do away with politics, not just in India, across the world. So, for example, in the US, it is known that a wall will not prevent immigrants from entering. Yet the politics say that we must invest in a wall to prevent immigrants from entering. Now, that's a political dimension. So, in the academics and scholarly sphere, we understand that and we circumvent that.
Okay.
That's why I keep saying that when we are studying migration and diaspora, we're not studying about right, wrong, good, bad, and so and so. So we are looking at multiple perspectives and see how it works.
Okay.
Sanjeev?
Got it, sir.
Okay. In Tamil Nadu, Rajni writes, there is a separate ministry for non-resident Tamil welfare. There's also a Tamil Diaspora Day celebrating to engage with them. Perfectly fine. See, each state now, because India itself is a huge country with so much of diversity, now states are themselves getting up to realize how to engage diasporas besides the central government trying to engage the diaspora. And again, engagement policies will not happen overnight. It will take some time. The bureaucratic mindset, the political mindset will need to understand how to engage diaspora. So it's a slow process. Smaller countries like Moldova, it becomes easier. Remember, with India and countries like China, China is again a different ball game because it's a single party, more like a single person or a single party rule. Democracy puts additional stresses on a system. So India being diverse, the numbers which are involved and being a democracy puts more strain. So we need to understand the engagement takes a little more time than the usual small state or a single party system. Okay, guys?
Sir.
Okay, perfect. We are out of time, so have a nice weekend. And next time when we meet next Saturday, we are going to look at how diasporic or diasporas or diasporic networks influence policy. They are also now influencing policy and how they are able to change states' policies in terms of lobbying, etc., and how the countries are also gearing up to understand that these policies need to change. As I said, these are slow. Human processes are slow processes. Individual might understand things fast, but a bureaucratic state takes a little time to understand. So it's okay. So have a nice weekend and have a nice week, and we'll see you. We'll see each other next Saturday. Bye, guys.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, it will be block 2 of a